Hey guys, couple of minutes late. Sorry, I picked up something and got black all over my hands, and I was trying to track it down. I don't know quite where it came from. My hands were lovely and clean, all ready to start. Just a moment while I make sure that the techie stuff is working, and give people time to hop on board. Just let me see on the other device and make sure I am broadcasting and not talking to myself. Here we go. Live. Amazing. Okay, it's all working as it should. These sessions, I can't believe a month has gone already. These sessions are most definitely, I was going to say unscripted, but intuitive is probably a slightly more artistic way of putting it. Or just spontaneous is perhaps a better word still. So the only preparation I have, which is something I do just as a matter of habit, is that my journal page has been primed with white gesso. It's only roughly done, it's not perfect, a few of the edges aren't perfect, and there's a couple of splatters of paint on there, and I still don't know where this black has come from on my hand, but I'm just going to pretend that didn't happen and hope I don't put my hand in it accidentally again, right in the middle of this, and ruin something. I've just rummaged through the cupboard and or the boxes of supplies and pulled out a bunch of solubles, a mixture of Neocolors. I've got Inktense pencils and crayons there, Neocolor 2 crayons. This is a aquarelle, a black aquarelle pencil, and a couple of Stabilo woodies, which are really lovely for mixed media work. They are water soluble, but they're really lovely and rich and creamy to use on top of mixed media layers as well. A couple more pencils there. So that's as planned as I am, and I'm just going to dive on in because that is the fun of these sessions, and I hope that you get inspired and enjoy. Fire me any questions. If I don't answer during the live, I will come to them later on. I can't always see them because I try and have the phone so that it's not blocking my view but still broadcasting clearly, so I have to keep kind of switching between devices to make sure that I'm still actually on your screens. But this is looking, from where I'm sat, pretty good. I will try and keep an eye on things, so if I slide off camera for any reason, please let me know. And I'm going to start. This is an Inktense stick. I think this is Payne's Grey. It's well used, but I'm pretty sure, I've only got a few, and I'm pretty sure this is what I had. And we're just going to see what happens and who appears today. The other thing I have just off to one side is a little bit of gesso, white gesso on my palette, because sometimes, especially with working wet on wet, it can get like a little bit too heavy, a little bit too overloaded, a bit too much colour on, and you can just push that back with a little bit of gesso. So I'm just going to feel my way and get some colour down onto this paper straight away, using my Inktense, really super loose and laid back and kind of expressive. I'm not giving myself any guidelines. We're just going to hollow in the eyes there. Can't believe I even made sure that my hands were clean, and I don't even know, that's really annoying me. I don't know where that black has come from, but there we are. I'll find it later, and I've got it all over my face because I've touched it again. So we're just hollowing out the eyes there, and I'm going to wet this as well. Definitely going to need some gesso to pull that back up. Like a suggestion of a nose there, and I think just the suggestion of where the lips meet, maybe that top lip, and the rest of it will leave a little bit vague for now. Maybe a suggestion of some hair kind of floating off there, just to give it a little bit of context. If you've got Neocolors, the water-soluble crayons, then you can use these like this as well. Just take some of the paper off and get some colour down using the side of it. They work really beautifully over gesso. This is one of my favourite ways to work. I almost always prime my journal pages with a layer of white gesso because I love the way that the the colour kind of slides around, it doesn't sink into the paper. You can see as I go off, I think you can see that. So just go, this part isn't gessoed, and that Inktense will sink into the paper so much differently than here, where it's just kind of floating around on top of that gesso. So I'm starting with the hair and keeping it really loose, because other than grab those few supplies out, I've actually been working on some computer stuff this afternoon. So I haven't had a warm up, I haven't been drawing at all today. So it's really a really great way to just, rather than try to do anything too perfect, excuse me, too perfectly, or you know, get into anything too intense right away, just moving some of the colours around and getting some marks on the page is a nice gentle way to start, and just letting it all evolve as it will. So the hair doesn't matter too much, because I haven't really decided what I'm going to do with that anyway, but that's just loosened me up, and I'm going to come now onto the face. This is just a wet flat brush. It's not a fancy brush, not a top end brand. It's not even specifically for watercolours. It's kind of a medium stiffness, so it's quite you can do quite a lot with it. You can spatter, you can get nice sharp edges as well, and just marking some shading in around the edge of the face here. Got a nice little drip that's about to happen just there, so I'm going to drop a bit more water on there. I'm working almost flat but not quite, so there's just enough slope there for if I add a little bit more water. I'm going to let that just run, because drips and splatters are all part of the fun as well. We're not looking for perfection here. What I'm doing is just putting that shading in around the edge of the face, because that gives it a curve. So where it comes towards you, where the nose comes out, and obviously where the shape of the face is rounded, that is going to be lighter. So I'm just laying in a little bit of kind of shape, suggestion of shapes there. Nothing at this point is precise, it could all change. I'm going to making that neck, get my words out, the neck darker underneath the chin there, because obviously that's in more shadow. That's probably a little bit wide for neck. Let's just push that back. The other thing I have here is somewhere is a trusty piece of tissue, so I'm just going to take that back a little bit. That's the other beauty of working over gesso, is that because this doesn't sink straight into the paper, it kind of sits on the top. You can lift it out, and you can lift watercolour out of watercolour papers as well, but these Inktense really do kind of sink in. The pigment goes right into the page, but it's quite easy to lift it out over gesso. Put my brush down. Where's it gone? Okay, here we go. Let's go back in now and get some. And I'm literally just using my hand to take a little bit of that water off. So this is super fast and loose, very laid back. I'm just going to put some of that lovely Payne's Grey into the sockets of the eyes. And this is going to be, the whole result of this, I already know, is going to be quite loose and messy and interesting and fun, because I'm working wet in wet. I'm not going to get my my hairdryer out and start kind of blasting that on a live video. So we're just going to keep on working, even though some of the layers aren't fully dried. The only thing I'm being sort of a little bit more precise about now is using the flat of the brush to hopefully just get the kind of the lower edge of those eyes somewhere in the vicinity of level. Again, it can all be tweaked and moved around, so it's not massively precise, but at this point, if I'm putting the eye sockets in, I do want them to be, you know, level with each other, and maybe of a similar size. We'll put a little bit of that Payne's on the top of the nose here as well. I'm going to just lift a little bit of that out, because there's an indentation here, and then the nose will come out. So the tip of the nose here is going to be lighter. We're just going to put a suggestion in for now of that kind of lower edge of the nose, the nostrils there, and I'll come back to that later. And let's put a little bit of suggestion in the shape of that upper lip. Again, it's super loose, and we're going to refine it as we go. The lip line there, and then obviously the lower lip will be beneath that, taking some of the moisture off the brush. And it's only now, like I say, I hadn't done any drawing for a while because I had some admin stuff to deal with, and it's only now at this point that I feel like I've actually loosened up and I've got a little bit more control. Part of that is because I can see things happening. I can sort of see a face emerging, kind of sculpting it out of the pigments, and part of that is just that it takes a good 10 minutes, sometimes longer, to just warm up, to just get in that zone. And sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes it might take half an hour and a piece of paper that goes in the bin, or you know, you just can't quite get there. That's okay too. But generally speaking, when I sit down to create, this is why I started just up there, just putting some pigment down for the hair, because you don't want to be you know, trying to lay in anything too tight and intricate when you first start. You've got to loosen up and kind of, you know, your hand starts to relax. You start seeing things happening, and then you're ready to really, really start to play. And I have no more idea of what's going to come out of this than you do. So that's all part of the adventure with these. Hopefully it'll turn into something that I like. That was Inktense Pencil. I'll check the colour and let you know in a second. Let's have a look. Fuchsia, so a super rich kind of deep pink. And I'm just putting a little bit of colour in, just playing around with that colour, sliding it around over the top there. It's a really strong fuchsia, and mixed with that blue is quite cool. So I'm pleased to see that when I grabbed my handful of solubles there, I've also got a few warmer colours as well. So we'll perhaps bring a little bit of that in now. Oops, sliding down to get the phone so that it wasn't blocking my view. I've had to kind of, I haven't really got this in the best place. I have to keep hold of it, but that's fine. Don't want the fuchsia. So this is now a red, so it's a little bit warmer. This is Inktense Hot Red. Let's have a little bit of that. Just add that onto that upper lip. I'm not going to put any on the lower lip because I'll use whatever pigment is up here. I could just use that to create a lighter shade of it for the lower lip. I'll put a touch just on the tip of the nose there as well, because I kind of like the nose to have a little bit of pinkness about it. I always find that kind of quite cute when I'm putting these portraits together. And just thinking about where the corners of the eyes are, and just putting a touch of that red in there, and we'll mark a little bit on the outside as well. We're not going for realism here, obviously. I am just making this up as I go along, but I like bringing in that warmer tone. One eye is kind of slightly in further from the edge of the face than the other one is. So let's bring this side in just a little bit. I don't think I want to take the other one any wider. So just bringing in kind of at the temple there, just darkening that in a little bit. And I've got a lot of forehead happening up here, but we'll get some more hair going on shortly. Let's grab this is my alternative to using a hairdryer. Sometimes I would actually blast this with a hairdryer before I added another layer, but as I say, I'm not going to do that on a live. So that kind of wet patch up there that was going on, I've just picked that up with my tissue and I'm going to go straight in. So the surface is quite wet, but it's not delicate because it's got gesso on it. So I know that I can just add in, although it's very wet, I can just add in a little bit of yellow. And what I'm doing with this is just warming the tone so that I don't have too much of a cold. As lovely as pink and blue are, the fuchsia and the Payne's Grey are, they're quite cold. And I just want a few sort of warmer tones to start coming in. Especially down on that neck there, which I actually didn't put any colour on. Let's get that fuchsia again. We'll just have a little touch of that. I'm going to put some below the chin and just towards the sides. And we're going to activate this with a brush in a moment. I'm going to go for some orange. This is the Neocolor 2, the water soluble crayons, Aquarelle. It just says orange. I quite often lose the labels from these, so sometimes you have to guess, but I try to let you guys know what I'm using. So we're just going to shade in, just bringing some warmth in around the eyes there. It's one of my favourite ways to work, to just show up and see what happens. If you've been following along with other stuff, I chose to do 10-minute faces for the 100 days project, and as I've gone on, I'm only a week in, and as I've gone on, I've come to realise that 10 minutes is, let's have a little of that orange just on the lips there, and I think at the sides of the nose as well. I realised that 10 minutes, when you get into the swing and into the flow, 10 minutes is a surprisingly long time. So if you haven't tried it or you want to have a go, you can join any time. You don't have to do 100 days, obviously, but have some fun with 10-minute portraits and see what happens. So this, like coming here now, actually having done quite a few of those this week, this feels like quite a long time. And my restriction here really is, my only restriction really is that I don't pause for drying times. So these can be quite raw. And obviously there is that little bit of fear that happens because there's always that part of me that thinks, oh, what if it goes wrong? What if it's terrible? But that's okay too. It's allowed. And we're all allowed to have less successful pieces and pages than others. Leave them in your journal unless you really hate them, because you will go back and work over them even if you just completely cover them with gesso and start over. Some of my pages I do that. While I've got this kind of mucky colour from the neck just on my brush, I'm just going to mark in, I didn't do anything about ears because I think the hair is probably going to cover them up anyway, but I'm going to just mark them in with, I've got a little bit of kind of a mix of the orange and that Payne's grey on my brush. So we'll just give a suggestion of ears, and I'm levelling them to roughly the bottom edge of the nose and up to the eyes. Again, you can play around with that, but that's roughly where they will go. But I'm not worrying too much about that because they're probably going to be covered up. Just helps you to get things in balance. So let's go up into the eye sockets now and blend some of this orange. My brush is just a little bit too wet. It's not a really nice wet brush, but not so much that the paint is kind of running everywhere out of control, because as I said, it floats around, it slides around on top of the paper when you're working over gesso. A lovely little bit of pink on the nose there. Just going in and out of my water and dabbing the brush actually on the back of my hand where my tissue is, just taking off like sort of excess, so it's wet but it's not kind of dripping wet. And I'm just looking to see, I think that nose is fairly central. Not that anyone's nose is entirely central, we're all a bit wonky, that's part of what gives us character. But do try to keep it even. I'm going to activate now this is a lovely mix of the orange and that very hot red. Some very full lips happening now. Let's see where this goes. This is when you start to see some character kind of develop. Once we get up into those eyes, that for me is where the expression really starts. So there's no pigment here on that lower lip. I'm just using a little bit that I'm picking up from the upper lip and taking that down. So where the lips meet, that's a little bit darker, and on the lower parts of like the bottom part of that lower lip a little bit darker, and leaving the outsides. I'm not taking them right up to the kind of outer corner of the lips. It's a little bit wide there, but I'll leave that and come back and fix that if it needs it. I'm going to grab my, well, that's just about drying. It won't be completely dry, but let's go back up now to the eyes. I'm going to start, because I'm right-handed, I'm going to start on the left. And just, this is the, this water-soluble pencil, I think it's a Conte, yeah. Anything soluble is fine. A Stabilo Marxall is great. Very, very dense. I quite like this if I'm just working fuss like this. The Marxall, if I sketched it as much as this, I'd have an awful lot of black pigment to deal with. This is a little bit more controlled. Just using a normal water-soluble pencil rather than this Stabilo, the Marxall. But the Marxall are amazing, they're wonderful to use. So lovely curve along the top lash line there, and then slightly less of a curve into that corner, not quite meeting that little red dot there that I had there, but that's fine. And then just eyeballing it to, I'm making a joke, I don't even know. Just looking, I'm not using any measuring techniques is what I mean. I'm just kind of looking over here and then just getting some pigment in and some shape over there, and it's all going to move a little bit because I'm going to activate this with some water, but I do want to put in just a suggestion of an eyelid as well. The eyes are always my favourite part because I love how the expression then appears. So I haven't used any black so far, I'm just pointing that out as well. But I will now just, let's have just a little touch here for nostrils, which I will activate shortly. So I'm keeping that quite light. And I can see now that my lips are slightly off to one side. So I'll even that out. So just a curve here, and then almost a straight line, a little dot to the corner, and just a gentler curve this side as well. So it's quite neutral, slight smile. Quite often, as if you know my work, my girls are quite often quite pouty and have a lot of attitude. Trying to keep this one just gentle. That sort of feels right for this. And we'll take a little bit of that black under the chin as well, and at the sides of the neck, just to define that a little bit more. I don't want to get too much on there because it's going to make it too dark, but that will do for now. The sides of the nostrils need some definition, but I'm not going to do that with black. I'm going to come in probably with a brown, maybe with a little bit of pink for that, to keep it soft. Let's get some irises in there. And again, no specific, this is my journal, I'm here to play, I'm here to have fun. And this is absolutely to just explore. It could all be changed, it could all be painted over. Being imperfect is exactly what it's meant to be. So I'm just looking at over here and just kind of adjusting this shape. They won't match, and that's fine. Let's put a pupil in as well. It's going up in under the eye there. If you draw the pupil as a circle right in the middle, even though that's what eyes really look like, it will look a little bit weird. She'll kind of look startled, so it really helps if you just bring the pupil going up in under the eyelid there. And she needs some eyebrows, but we're not even going there yet because eyebrows add so much expression. I kind of need to see what she's doing and what she's wanting to tell us before we get in quite that far. So I'm going to let that settle just a little bit and bring in some more colour into the hair. I really want to grab some, let's go for a darker colour. This is, again, this is Inktense. I don't know the colour, it's a crimson something, but it's going to go beautifully over the Payne's Grey. It's going to really warm that up and deepen it. And I'm going to put a lot of water on this. I'm going to let this kind of drip and just do its thing down the sides of the page. I don't want it to come down too much over the face with lots of drips. Not yet, because I want to get in and do those eyes first. But let's make a start with that and then come back. She's put her brush down. I can't find it. That's my brush. Okay. I can see there's a few people watching. Amazing. Thank you. I'm so happy you're here. There will be a replay, and this will stay up for a few days here in the group, and then it will move over to my YouTube. I'll let you know when that happens. So if you're watching on replay after this has all happened, then let me know. And obviously, if you don't get to it today or in the next few days, and head on over to YouTube and let me know over there. Give me a follow. If you're kind of new around here or you haven't heard me say this before, these little live sessions, I have committed to doing them every month for 2025. So I can't believe that we're already into March, but it's okay. It's really good. It's really good for me to just commit to that. Super good practice to just come up live and play and see what happens, and have a little bit of an adventure. Some will be, I'm sure, more successful than others, or more, I'll like them more than I like others, but that's okay too. This is the Inktense stick. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice today. That's the Inktense stick with onto wet, so it's kind of coming up a lot more strongly. Gorgeous, deep, rich pigments. You might have heard me rave about them before, but I won't stop doing that. I just love them. I've only got a few, and I want more because they're just so gorgeous. I'm loving the richness of that hair now, and also how kind of how loose it still is. You can still see the brush strokes, but there's just enough depth there so that I've lost my lines in that where I first sketched out that face. So this is the Stabilo Woody in brown. Oh, got a nice drip happening there as well. God, I love a drip. And I'm going to bring in now some of the brown just to deepen the shading into the eye sockets. I'm going for brown rather than more of the blue. Let's go around under the eyes a little bit as well, because it gives them a lovely expression just around the corners there. I'm going with brown rather than going back in with the Payne's Grey, the blue, because it's that bit warmer. And I do want to have a warmer skin tone and, you know, those cooler tones up in the hair. And let's have a little touch, I don't want to overdo it, a little touch of brown just on the edge of these nostrils here, and we'll bring in some shadow there for the filtering just above the lip. She's a little wide in the eyes and a little narrow in the chin. If I was kind of going for reality there, that's something I would have wanted to change. But it's my journal, and it's play, and it's fun, and this is really more about exploring mixed media and what you can do, and coming up with something really expressive and light-hearted. Just activating that brown. A really scrappy, loose touch. I'm not going to let myself get caught up with making perfect lines. Deliberately holding the brush over the top rather than holding it as if I was writing, because that also helps to keep me loose, keeping a loose hold on it, and letting the water run. Not worrying about them being sort of identically level. Let's have a little more of that brown just beneath the hairline there, just to warm that shadow, because it's very cold with the blue, and that blends better then with the yellow tones. Just got a little bit on my brush, so I'm bringing it in kind of further down as well, so that things sort of unify. Let's have a look. Reasonably dry there. I'm going to use a damp brush. I'm going to stay with the same brush, so it could go well. It might just be a little bit too clunky, but we're going with it. And just activating that black pencil now with the very edge of the brush. Again, it's not perfection. That's part of what gives this that wonderful kind of loose, watery effect. It adds to the expression. Let's go in now, the sides of the nose there and the nostrils. Just activating that. She's already telling us a story. She's already showing us kind of who she is. A little bit more yellow, just because it's all just a bit too cool for my taste. We've got a bit too much pink and blue happening still. So we'll bring in a little more of that yellow. This is a Derwent Deep Cadmium. There's a lot of cadmium yellow in my complexion and skin tones. I love how it warms it. You can paint the face almost all in black and brown. Bring in a little bit of cadmium and suddenly there's this warmth that comes in. Definitely one of my favourite yellows. And the pencil is not as strong as the Inktense, so I can afford to be a little bit more generous with it. I could not do this and achieve that same sort of effect and move the pigment around if I was working on an unprimed page. So do love to just work over a page that has plenty of gesso on it. And again, I'm just using my tissue that's resting on the other hand, which is also holding the pad into position. Thank goodness we haven't slid off the video yet. Let's get in along that lower lash line now. That black is just enough black. I really don't want too much dark. I'm really loving the use of colour in this, but there are just a few definitions that need black. There kind of seems to be no way around it. And I'm going to activate the black in the pupils as well, just over that Payne's grey that I initially put in there. It's not quite black enough. Let's bring in a little bit more because those are going to need to be dark, and it's going to take a minute or two to dry. So just thinking about the order that things are going to go in. Leaving a little bit of white, just putting a bit of pigment in because I'm going to activate it and that will spread it out and it will come up a lot heavier. And whilst that is doing its thing, let's figure out the whites of these eyes. So this is a tiny little brush and, oops, which I just dropped. Okay, I'm going to grab another one. Tiny little slanted brush with some white gesso on it. And I'll probably need to do this a couple of times. I'm not going to paint the whole thing white because that just doesn't look right. The whites of your eyes are never white. So where the eye kind of comes out, that ball shape, obviously the light is going to be hitting that, so you want that to be quite white. But going into the corners, going up onto the lids, and to a lesser degree going down into the kind of lower lash line, that's not going to be a pure white. And this is where, if you've got your eyes kind of drawn in and they're not very even, this is the point as well where you can just add a little bit of white, more white to that edge there, and that just has made that circle a little neater, but it has made it slightly smaller than the other one, so I can now go across and measure that up. Again, it's not scientific, you know, these are not intended to be identical, but at the same time, unless I consciously want something, you know, something to express with particular focus on one eye, I want them to look like they're meant to live in the same face, if that makes sense. A little bit more white just along that lash line there. And I'm just going to let that dry. It will probably need a touch more on there. While I've got my gesso, let's have a little bit of white on the bulb of the chin there, just to pull that forward. So I'm just working on my tissue. I'm going to put a little bit of tissue just on, a little bit of gesso just on that tissue there, so that it's closer, because I'm having to reach over for my palette. So these are just tiny touches, but it's quite intense, obviously. So, you know, it's a very white, so it just picks out these little highlights the nose and the kind of the top edge of those nostrils. Just blending that in. And I'm really just, as it dries, it will fade slightly. So I'm really just waiting for these bits to dry a little bit so I can figure out how much more white I want or I need to put in there to make the whites of the eyes really work. They're not too bad as far as matching, which I'm pleased to see. Sometimes one eye just ends up way bigger than the other and it feels like you can't do anything about it. This one is a little wider than it needs to be. I can't tell that from looking down on it, weirdly, but I can tell from when I look on my screen. So that's a really good tip there as well, which I may have mentioned before. Taking a photograph, sometimes holding your work up to a mirror really helps as well. That's just brought in the side of that eye a little bit more. Let's put some orange there as well, just to soften that very hard black edge. Wet brush, going back to the original brush and just pulling that in. So the side of that eye is perhaps a little better balanced with the other one. There's still some work to do there, but we'll leave that for now. So back to those eyelids. Let's have a little bit of a highlight actually on the middle of the eyelids there as well. Again, the gesso will dry and be a little bit more clear than what you can see there. So I may go back over that as that dries. And especially as I'm working on a wet, this is definitely not dry because it's over gesso, so it's definitely still quite wet. And just the middle of the eye there underneath as well. We'll give that a little bit of a highlight where the light would catch. Where the eye socket kind of holds the eyeball, if you like. Okay, now I think that's probably dry enough to play around with. Assuming that the light source is coming from above, which I've kind of assumed, because obviously if it was going upwards then I wouldn't have all this darkness under the neck. The lower parts of these eyes, it's going to be a lighter colour than the upper part because the light is going to be hitting that. That's a very simplistic way of putting it, but that really works in a journal. This is again an Aquarelle. I think it's not an Aquarelle. Yeah, a Neocolor, Neocolor 2. I've lost the. It's something jade, I think, but I've lost the half of the wrapper. Well, lost half the crayon, but I've lost half of the wrapper, so I can't give you the exact name. But it's quite a specific colour to them. And this is the Stabilo Woody in a darker green. I don't think these even specify what colours, but they only come in about 12 or maybe 24 colours anyway. But the upper part of the eye is going to be a darker green. Let's just get a little bit of that in there. And come in now with that tiny little brush. If I can find it. That I was using for my gesso. I'll just clean that off on my trusty tissue there. So this is only just damp. It's really not very wet at all. And I'm just using that damp brush, first of all, to activate the darker green. And you can see how that works beautifully because it activates the black as well. Just wash my brush off, or wiped my brush off, not washed it, in between. A little bit too much water on there. If you're not working live, which I am, then obviously you can blast these layers with your heat gun or hairdryer so that you're not sort of fighting the whole working wet in wet thing. I've just washed my brush and then I'm going into the lighter green down here. That might drip just a little bit, so let's grab another bit of tissue. There's quite a lot of water on there. Just take some of that out to lift out some of that colour. And that Inktense has, because that's dried, that's showing up through as well. So you've got a little bit of pattern and texture in those eyes, which really works beautifully. I love that. I don't think, so a touch more green up there because I've lost a bit. I don't think I want to do too much more with those eyes. As soon as that expression starts to come through, for me, I just want to leave that. I don't want to mess with it too much more. We need to give her some eyebrows. Just looking for something that is soft enough that if it doesn't quite work, I can wash it out. So I'm going to actually sketch in the eyebrows now with my yellow and then go over it, because that means I can just wash that over if I don't get them placed quite hard on them. I'm going to keep it really neutral. So just a really sort of gentle arch, almost a straight line. And again, I've started on the left because actually my hand's right down here, so I can see either side. But if you're right-handed, it really helps to start on the left, because then you're not blocking your view when you come across to the other side. I think I said that already about the eyes. And then I'm actually just looking across to my other screen over here, where I can see the live image, because that really helps me to decide whether they're in the right kind of place. I want to use the Payne's Grey, or that dark, the Payne's Grey pencil, but it may go a little bit green because I've got quite a lot of yellow there. So I'm just going to soften this in first with a little bit of the fuchsia, because who doesn't want fuchsia eyebrows? I'm just matching them loosely to the hair, but I don't want them to be quite as dark. Let's have just a tiny bit of the Payne's Grey from the pencil. This is the Inktense. And then activate that. Keep putting my brush down and then losing it. There it is. Again, it's a damp brush. I've rinsed it, but I'm really kind of taking most of the moisture out of it. They're way too yellow. But it's also way too wet to go in with the pencil again. So we'll come away from that for a minute. This neck is a little too dark, so I'm going to push some of that back with a touch of white gesso. I've still got some just on my tissue here. It's really super messy way to work, which I think adds to the freedom of it. You don't have to set up a whole palette. You could just show up, grab a few supplies and play and let it happen. My eyes are about dry now. Let's get a little tiny brush or a little tiny point and put some light into those eyes. I didn't activate that black, but I don't think I will. I think I'm going to leave that. I've got a nice little bit of shading happening there just through not filling that whole pupil with black. So I'm going to go with that and put in those highlights on those eyes with just a drop of white gesso. Let's highlight the middle of the eyelid just a little bit more. Touch more white on those, those eyeballs. I'm going to activate this bit of red as well, because that's just a little bit harsh. Let's just blend that into the corners. A little bit of red still on the brush. Let's take it into the outer corners as well. Tiny little marks, but they really make a difference at this point. I think those lips could be just a little more red, so let's just have another look at those. I feel like we're nearly there. I could probably, when this is dry, maybe add a few more accents of white with the gesso, but I'm not going to do that anything like that until it's dry. So I will post a picture of the finished piece as well. On that lower lip, you can see where I haven't activated the brown hair either. Let's just have that little touch of shadow happening there. And then these probably, yeah, we're good. This is just dry enough now to darken in these brows without too much disaster. If I'd gone in too wet, it would have come up like super, super dark. Because the pigment activates, and it's really hard because the Inktense pigments are so strong. They're a little bit harder to lift out when you get to this kind of stage. Let me go back into my gesso. Let's grab a little bit more on my delightful palette here, Messy Hands. And let's have a little bit of the brow bone here. Let's have a little touch of white there, just to help to sort of sculpt the shape of the eyes. So this is a kind of a gentle touch of gesso. I don't want it to be as intense as obviously what's going on in the eyeballs or anything like that. And the middle of the forehead as well. I'm going to put just a little touch of white there. And the white above the lips and that, I think probably is just doing what it needs to do. So the decision now is, do I go crazy and add? I was really loving the drips that were happening. I kind of feel like maybe that would be fun to let some drips happen. Let's darken these lash lines. Not drawing individual lashes, I'm just going to darken them towards the outside. So sort of a few lines there, but nothing too specific. It's more of a suggestion of lashes than specific lashes. I'm not worrying about matching them up. Darken that in. Darken the lip line here as well. I need a highlight on that lower lip. Back to my trusty gesso. I'm still thinking about bringing in some drips. I kind of feel like that might be fun. I'm going to do that by using my Inktense and actually rubbing it on my palette. I can get enough to come off. And then activating it. Let's do that. So this, I'll just show you, I'm just rubbing that into some water on my palette. So it's just making some kind of blue paint. And we're going to wet this a little bit more, because drips are fun and they add a looseness and a sense of, just not being too much in control. Let's have a little bit more. I'm going to let that just drip down and do its thing just over the side of that eye. I don't want it to disappear too much. But let's just bring in now some of that gorgeous, 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 rich. It is Payne's Grey, but it's a very blue grey. Payne's Grey varies so much from brand to brand. And the Inktense one is a very blue grey. That makes sense. Let's have a little bit more water here. I've already got a drip happening there. Let's get a little bit more ink on my brush. I'm going to let that just come down. If it goes over the eye, I'm good with that. It's fine. Let's just see what happens. Yeah, that's going to just come over the corner of the eye. I just love that looseness. It's kind of being a little bit brave as well, and letting these supplies just kind of setting them free, letting them work their magic. Let's go for a little more pink up here, so let's edge it with this lovely pink. I think this was the pink that I used in her hair. Yeah, it was. I thought I mistakenly added in an extra colour there for a second, but I didn't. That's fine. Just making sure that I can just see my underpainting there of the outline of the face there, just showing up through. So I'll sort of hide that. I think I'm going to stop there. If you managed to stick around for the whole thing, thank you so much for watching. If you watch on a replay, just leave me a little comment, #replay. Let's get a little bit more of, I always do this, so I'm going to stop now and then just find something else to fiddle with. A little bit more of a highlight on the lip there. Could even have a bit more on the brow bones, but I think we should leave that where it is and call it done. And happy journaling. I might add some writing at some point. But for me, it's just my chance to play and enjoy and share. So I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. I will check back for any comments. If you have a go, or you feel inspired by anything, or you have other creative projects that you want to share, please do. You're very welcome to post in the group. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Kind of feel like I want to add a bit of gesso, just a few marks of gesso on the hair there, but this is too wet. I'll just show you what I mean. Where it's kind of dried up here, I could probably highlight a little bit of this with a few sort of lighter areas. But I kind of love the whole drippy thing as well, so I'm not going to do too much. I'm going to stop with that because this side's really wet, and I'm just going to mess it up and let that dry and just see what happens and how she turns out. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye.